The main story of Inazuma is behind us now, and most of it has largely been resolved. The Raiden Shogun is no longer acting out, Inazuma isn't a closed nation anymore, and the Vision Hunt Decree is practically gone. But there was something that happened during and before the 2.0 story that hasn't really been answered. At the end of the main story, the traveler had asked Raiden A why Electro visions have stopped appearing in Tevat, and the response that we got from A herself was that the archons have little to do with the distribution of visions. But if the archons have nothing to do with this, why did the Electro visions stop appearing? Before we get into that, if you want to see more Genshin Impact content, do consider subscribing to the channel. The main power system that exists in Genshin Impact revolves around elemental manipulation and the visions that enable them. Those who have high ambitions, dreams, and a strong sense of will are often gifted with a vision. To the common person, these visions are a sign of acknowledgement, an indication that the gods have identified and recognized the greatest and the best humanity has to offer, and that these individuals are destined for great things. What isn't common knowledge is that those who receive these visions are actually beginning their journey to godhood. Even the vision wielders themselves do not know of this hidden purpose. The delivery mechanisms of visions aren't truly known, and in the handful of examples we have, they tend to just appear out of thin air when an individual is at a critical point in their life. A year before the main story, the Archon of Inazuma had begun her pursuit of eternity. As a result of this desire and some fortuitous shenanigans, the Vision Hunt Decree was enacted. The idea was that individually strong ambitions obstructed a unified Inazuma and stood in opposition to the eternity that the Electro Archon was pursuing. But we aren't here to talk about this event. Throughout the Vision Hunt Decree, a rather odd side effect regarding visions had happened. Scholars in Sumeru began to notice that ever since the decree was enacted, all throughout Tevat, Electro visions had stopped appearing. They concluded that due to these two events coinciding, the distributions of visions are directly linked to the will of the specific elemental archon. Meaning to say that because Raiden A had believed individuals shouldn't have visions, she was somehow able to restrict its distribution to the rest of Tevat as well. On paper, this seemed to make sense for the scholars, but after the Vision Hunt Decree was lifted, the traveler had the opportunity to ask Raiden A this question directly. A revealed that the Archons have little to do with the distribution of visions, and was herself shocked to hear that no new Electro visions had appeared in the last 1 year. She goes on to say that the entire mechanism worked on the whims of Celestia and not the Archons. So which side is telling the truth here, or is everyone just being deceived? Well, figuring out what exactly happened is difficult, as we aren't really privy to the full rule set that visions abide to. Probably the simplest explanation is that Sumeru's initial research was just wrong. I doubt they have any reliable way to track where and when each and every vision appears. It could be that their observations were only focused on certain areas, such as only within the Sumeru region. Electro visions may still have appeared in other regions or remote locations where the Sumeru Academia do not have oversight in. But this theory, while pretty plausible, isn't very interesting, so what other possibilities are there? Well, what if the Archons just aren't told of their entire role? It could be possible that the Archons can and do influence this process on some level, but they just aren't aware of it, and thus why Raiden A claims to have no control over it. Celestia might be withholding this information to perhaps obscure the truth about it. If you think about it, every person or god we have met has different ideas about this, which makes it hard to discern the real truth. It's also possible that Raiden A just didn't know. To add to that, before taking up the mantle of the Electro Archon, A's role was that of a Kagemusha, a body double / bodyguard. Even in the book, Treasured Tales of the Choken Shin Kageuchi, it was said that Makoto was the one who had actually ascended to Archon status and only later reconstituted A. So maybe Raiden A, being relatively new to the Archon role, just isn't aware of the whole truth, or maybe none of the Archons were actually given the full picture. But if Raiden A truly didn't know the whole story, who else can be accountable or responsible for the disappearance of Electro visions? The numerous confusing twists and turns this question has seems to imply that, at the very least, Celestia doesn't want anyone finding out the truth about how the system actually works. Without even diving too deeply into it, we already have multiple different sources claiming different things, and maybe this confusion is by design. Perhaps Celestia is in full control, but is careful to not let it appear this way. It's possible that in an attempt to keep people in the dark about how visions are granted, Celestia chose to play along with the actions Raiden A took, so that it would seem that her actions contributed to the disappearance of the Electro vision. This ruse would ensure people would keep thinking that the archons were the ones in control of the visions, while in truth it was actually Celestia. In fact, if this really was their goal, then it can be said they achieved it somewhat, as the Sumeru scholars concluded the very same thing. Finally, all of this could just be a huge giant coincidence. Maybe no Electro visions appeared because there just wasn't anybody to resonate with the element at this time. We also don't have information on how often a vision appears, and maybe a 1-year gap isn't such a surprising outcome in the grand scheme of things. Plus, it's not like those who received their visions before the Vision Hunt decree suddenly lost theirs. It could just be that these visions are as finicky as the gods themselves and appear exactly when they want to, and not a moment too soon or too late. So with all of this information, how important is it that we know what caused this? Does it matter at all why the Electro visions stop appearing? Well, I think at the very least, it might hint at some guarded secret and true purpose of the visions for this particular detail to be as mysterious and as misleading as it is. It could also hint at the existence of a power within Tevat that is strong or influential enough to outright stop the production of visions, something we haven't seen happen before. Despite all the theories and potential outcomes, we aren't really any closer to understanding the truth about visions and why the Electro ones have suddenly stopped appearing. I'm inclined to believe that once we learn a little bit more about how Tevat works, we might have this particular question be indirectly answered. Alternatively, maybe this is just a minute plot hole that Hoyoverse wishes we'd forget. That brings the video to an end though, and if you enjoyed it, do consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video, and I'll see you in the next one. As usual, have a nice day.